As a teenager, I know everything about, well, everything. Halloween, that franchise. Man, I remember when the original came out. I've watched all the movies, clearly in the theater, and I binged in my room like a no-life. Man, I'm just as cultured as those old heads who were actually alive during the time. Could you imagine? Hopping on trends? Yeah, we all do it. Doing it way too late? Now that's what this guy does. What do you mean I'm single? I mean, let's look at his resume. He started playing Fortnite in 2022. He just watched Stranger Things for the first time. Hell, he didn't even know who Tom Cruise was until we saw Top Gun a month ago. And that guy's hot. Why is this intro just me explaining how uncultured I am? Or do I have a story for you? Trends are much more widespread today than ever, so naturally there are people who desperately oppose them, simply for the purpose of being different. These people follow one of two paths. They either later watch the media, see how good it was, or why it was such a trend, or they remain single for life and never experience these trends for what they were worth. Whew, crisis averted. But the point of all this, I love Stranger Things, but it being a trend might have ruined it just a little bit. To be fair, that's the inevitable path of all trends. The producer doesn't really have a choice because, well, they have to keep doing what's making them money. Like, imagine if the show was only one season long, they would have had way less money, and the viewers, well, they would have had lives. Basically what I'm saying is, Stranger Things, like a lot of trends these days, such as Call of Duty, Fortnite, and even just bigger franchises in general, such as Halloween, have pushed themselves almost too far in a sense. I mean, let's think about it. Do we really need 20 movies about a tall guy who doesn't talk and kills babysitters? No. The problem with these franchises or trends is that they keep the formula for the same pretty much because that's what sells. Halloween was mentioned because it's just the obvious example. It does this shamelessly, but other franchises aren't innocent either. Star Wars, for example, is pumping out content like never before, which sure could be because it now has a much larger budget under Disney than it did under Lucasfilm, but it's also not the same as it used to be in another sense. There isn't a creative mastermind, the inventor of the franchise, in George Lucas, crafting each scene and storyline to be exactly what he originally planned. Like the sand scene would not be the same.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
There isn't the same passion behind the project now, which is shown by the abundance of shows released nowadays. Obi-Wan, sure, it's good, but is it really necessary? I mean, it starts with Obi-Wan on Tatooine and Leia safe at home. It ends with Obi-Wan on Tatooine and Leia safe at home. Sure, it was a fun ride for what it was, and I'm not knocking that whatsoever. My point is, there isn't the same passion behind the show that was behind the original movies made by the creator of the franchise, because if he was still the mastermind of these projects, I feel like there'd be more depth to them, in terms of progress made from beginning to end. Now that I'm done angering Star Wars fans, let's clown Fortnite, eh? The game is fun for what it is, or at least it was when it was first released. I mean, the concept of a battle royale with guns at the time, yeah, it's a great idea. And there was passion put into it by the people who were making it. I mean, it's not like Apex or Warzone these days just hopping on the trend. Fortnite made the trend. Are you trying to tell me a Darth Vader skin is a passion project from the developers? The game is pretty much an ad now, just adding fairly random branding to its item shop and new pieces of the map that inevitably just call back to the original map in some way. Bringing back Tilted Towers, for example, was a huge event, because the only way the current game can bleed the same passion as the original is if it literally copies the original. And now for example 3, Stranger Things. Now if you haven't seen the show, I'm going to be spoiling some things, so just be aware. If you have, work with me for 1 minute. The show is great, season 1 is amazing, and I like a lot about the later seasons, but I do feel like it's almost too much at times. I mean, sure, they couldn't end at the end of season 1 because, well, it was too popular and the characters were pretty iconic. So I totally understand this show continuing for at least a couple more seasons. 2 or 3 at the most. But 5? What made season 1 great was the mystery of it all. That sense of mystery hasn't really been matched, but season 4 is actually doing a fairly good job at reinvigorating that initial concept. My problem is in the middle. Season 2, with Will being the spy and all, sure there's a sense of mystery, but we already know the source of evil and how it's eventually going to be stopped in 11. We've already seen these Demogorgons and monsters before, lowering how scary they are in retrospect when the best attempt to scare us is by throwing 30 of them on the screen. Then in season 3, the mystery factor is completely out the window because they tell us the answer to the mystery pretty much immediately by showing us the Russians are behind the events of the season in the first minute. of the first episode. Now, this show isn't as egregious as others in terms of just going on for way too long and not being a passion project anymore, but in some ways, it does lack in the middle seasons what made it so good to begin with. And that's not its own fault. It's hard to keep that magic going for 5 seasons for a show that's focused around monsters. It's why season 4 is so refreshing, because that sense of mystery has sort of returned with the new enemy in Vecna. My problem with season 4 is that they immediately retconned the whole Hopper death scene from the previous season, and the emotion at the end of season 3, but I guess that's whatever. The point of all this, and I'm gonna make this point with another show for an example, stuff like this, stuff built on passion, needs to know when to end. Gravity Falls was one of my favorite shows growing up. Everything about it oozed passion, from the mysteries to the storylines to the characters and settings, and when it ended, it was over. They didn't bring it back for a 3rd season to show us the same thing but in a less passionate manner because, well, the story was over. The show was all it was ever supposed to be, and the creators knew that, which is why they knew despite the popularity the show received, they couldn't bring it back because that would ruin what was good about it. Now, my biggest problem with Gravity Falls is that Stan gets his memories back immediately after sacrificing them to save the world. I don't know why shows like this are so afraid to lose main characters. There are pretty much no stakes in either this or Stranger Things. So here's where I'll end this rant. Stranger Things is good, and season 4 has been amazing so far, in the sense that it's the closest thing to season 1 we've had since that season, and it's arguably better in some ways. The mystery has returned with Vecna and his origin story, as well as how to stop him. We almost lost the main character in Max as well, but in my opinion, the biggest problem with it is that I never felt like she was in danger. The season is great, but the one thing it's missing so far is stakes, which is what I hope they pay off in the final 2 episodes. In the meantime, I'll need to find other ways to have no life, such as write an entire YouTube video on my problem with trends in big franchises.
So I think maybe that's why I came in here, to try to maybe stop that change. To turn back the clock. To make things go back to how they were. But I know that's naive. It's just not how life works. It's moving. Always moving, whether you like it or not. And yeah, sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's sad. And sometimes it's surprising. Happy. So you know what? Keep on growing up, kid. When life hurts you, because it will, remember the hurt. The hurt is good. Please, if you don't mind, keep the door open 3 inches.
Man, he'd be so disappointed to see what I'm doing here, wouldn't he?